Hello all, welcome to T's at IETF 112 virtual. I'm Lou Berger. We have with us Vishnu Pavan Biram, co-chair, as well as our secretary, our new secretary, Luis Contreras. We really appreciate Luis being willing to serve as secretary and continue on the tradition that Matt laid out of really being very helpful behind the scenes. So welcome, Luis. Pavan has already put the link into for HedgeDoc. If you could join us there, we really appreciate it. It's both where we do collaborative minute taking and also gives you the link to all the materials and the slides that we're going to go through today. Next. As always, we start off our meetings by going over our policies, procedures for how we operate at the IETF. This is all covered under the Note Well, and we have a set of BCPs, of documents that cover how we operate, and notably related to contributions to the IETF, intellectual property, and next slide. And a piece that the ISG has asked us to really highlight. It was on the previous slide, as we always mention it, but really want to highlight code of conduct, and that it's we've had a long-standing document, long-standing practice for how we should treat each other with respect and courtesy and be professional. And it's it's okay to have heated arguments, but keep it technical and keep it on the topic. And the ISG is asked to highlight this. You've seen discussions on the IETF list, so it's an important topic. Next. You're on Meet Echo right now, so you have found us. Thank you for joining us today. And our blue sheets are automatic. We use the chat or Jabber for a little bit of side comments, but if you would like to say something at the mic and you're unable to come to the mic yourself, please just put @mic into the Jabber and someone will read it out. And we are using Meet Echo's integrated queue control. I mentioned earlier HedgeDoc, CodeMD, whatever it's being called today, for note-taking, and please joining us there. The link in the chat is the right link. I think the link here might be wrong, but and all of our material is online. Next. We have a fairly long agenda, but unlike normal, we actually have time that's available for discussion. Normally we have these ridiculously packed sections. We ask for some extra time, we got it, so we have a little more time for discussion. It is possible that the network slices discussion will continue past its allotted time, in which case we will still take the half-hour break, but we will just pick up the conversation at the start right after the break. So that number 4 might extend into number 5 if necessary. We'll be also a little looser on time than we have been in the past, although we still will put up the timer as usual. One change here is on slot 9. Reza will be presenting versus Shusong, who was originally listed. Next. So this is our usual discussion about working remote. I think everyone is really familiar with that. We are working remote and continue to do so. The mail list is how the working group judges consensus. These discussions are very important that we're having right now. Our periodic informal meetings as well as interims are hugely important, but it's really, we gauge consensus on the list, and it's important when we're trying to basically close down on a topic to show that we're done with it. It's also equally important when we start new discussions. So if you have a new idea or a new document that you want to get in front of the group, the mail list is the right place to introduce it. Publish your document, send some an intro summary to the list, and try to generate some discussion there. It's just as important to do that at the beginning as it is at the end. Our online meetings continue. It seems that for the next meeting, we have hope of maybe doing a mixed meeting of online and in person. We'll see what happens. That has not been announced yet, but stay tuned. But we have the ability to do informal as well as interim meetings. If you would like a periodic WebEx, as some groups have done, just ask the chairs and we'll set it up. If we're slow, just remind us. Hopefully our secretary, the addition of the secretary will make that a little bit smoother. We also can do interims, and MeetEcho is now available on interims, and it's great for that. Next. As a reminder, we have an IPR disclosure process to check, to sort of help us in that process we referred back to in Note Well, where we ask everyone to disclose any IPR that their intellectual property that they are they know about in work that they are contributing on. And we poll both at the beginning of the process on adoption, as well as at the last call step. And you see we just started one today. As you add new authors, we think it's really important to get a polled response from that person, or even an unsolicited response from that person. This only applies to working group documents. And if you are an author or an editor and you add someone, we really ask you to have that person make an explicit statement on the list at the time they are added. We did have a surprise IPR disclosure on someone who was added and didn't disclose. And you know, it's sort of not fair to the working group to have such a late IPR disclosure. Next. So what's new with our documents? We have no new RFCs and nothing in the editor queue. We'll have to try to speed up and get some new things in there. We do have a batch of documents that are headed to last call. So you know, I think that we're going to fill the queue again. Not sure why that formatting came out strange, but we have one document in publication requested. I believe that is with our AD. There was an update issued. So it was with the authors, but I think it's now back with the AD. And we've had one recent adoption. Next. There was one liaison received. Excuse me. It's from GSMA. I don't know if that's actually a formal liaison or a communication. GSMA is part of 3GPP, so I'm not, I'll defer to the IAB on what their liaison or communication relationship is, but we do have one new white paper available. Please review it. If we have some working group documents in this area now on IETF network slicing, it may be time to send a response. And so if you're interested, as always, we're contribution driven. Please send a proposal that's interesting to the list. That should be to the list. And we'll discuss it and go from there. Next. That might be my final slide. I don't remember. Go on.
Yeah, that was the final slide.
Okay, great. If you have any questions, come to the queue. If not, we'll proceed with Pavan giving the detailed draft status.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Pavan Biram, your other co-chair. Before I start with the working group document status, let me thank our new secretary, Lewis, for proactively collating the status reports and compiling the slide deck. There are 22 working group documents that are listed here. 5 of those colored in blue are on the agenda today. We have one document, the signaling extensions draft for SMP, for which we put in a publication request a while back. Lou went over the status of that in the previous deck, so it's not covered here. So that leaves us with 16 documents. The status for each of those is covered in this deck. I don't intend to walk through each and every one of those here. I will, however, double click on a select few and dwell on them a little bit. For the rest of them, you can use your own pace, go through the slides and the reports that were sent out to the list and ask questions if any. So let me jump to slide 6 first. Um, so this is the enhanced VPN framework document. A new revision for this was published in late October. Um, there is some new text describing in detail the applicability of enhanced VPN to network slicing. As part of the next steps, the authors have indicated that they would like to sort out the relationship between enhanced VPN and IETF network slice. From the chair's point of view, this is a topic that has been discussed on the list before. And as noted in the IETF network slices framework document, enhanced VPN does offer one solution approach to realize IETF network slices. Uh, as noted in that document and also on the list, it is not the only solution approach for realizing IETF network slices. So if there is a specific question that the authors are looking to get answered from the working group regarding this relationship, please do initiate a thread on this on the mailing list. Like Lou mentioned, we also do have some time towards the end of the second session today set aside for open discussion. So the authors could possibly leverage some amount of that time for discussing this. Let me jump to slide 8. This is the PCCC use cases document. As stated in the previous meeting, the chairs have decided to take this to last call. It seems like there are still a couple of items pending. The authors have indicated that they would be wrapping this up soon, so please do review this in anticipation of last call. This is the 3272 BIS document. A new revision for this was published yesterday. The editor's note suggests that there are still a couple of pending items. There is still this open question on whether the scope needs to change from overview and principles of internet traffic engineering to overview and principles of traffic engineering. As Adrian says here, there has been silence on this topic. So if anyone wishes to chime in or help Adrian out with suggested changes, please do come forward and help out. This is a large document, could definitely use some thorough reviews from the working group. Adrian, do you have anything else to add to this?
No, thank you. As you noticed, I published, I posted an update for the Keep Alive and to pick up one of Med's comments. And this is just sitting in my pile of to-do things.
Okay, thanks. Next up is the SF-aware topology Young model document. The authors have said that they are almost done with this. They have requested a Young doctor's review for this. We did initiate the review yesterday. Hopefully that will get done in the next few weeks. Let me jump to, I think that's slide 17. So this is the base T Yang document. The authors have requested working group last call. The initial plan was to progress this document and 3 other documents, the RSVP Yang document, the RSVP T Yang, and the T MPLS Yang document together. But there are still some minor issues open against the other 3. So the plan is to initiate the working group last call process for this document first and let the other 3 follow soon. The IPR for this just got started. So please do review all these documents in anticipation of the last call. So those are the items that we wanted to cover as part of this deck. If there are any
on that document, one of the authors is mail is bouncing. So co-authors, please check that all the authors' addresses are right and contributor addresses are right. Thank you.
Acknowledged.
So yeah, if there are any questions on the status of the documents that I went over, or for any other working group document, you can post that question now, or we could use the discussion time later. I don't see anybody jumping onto the mic, so we can proceed to the next presentation. I believe that's Dhruv.
Yeah, thanks, Babu.
Give me 1 second. Go ahead.
So, yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'll be discussing an update to a bunch of Yang models that I'm the editor on. So, next slide, please. So the set of models that we have today is the VN model, the two models which are telemetry related, which augments the IETF-TE and IETF-VN with telemetry details. And then we have a set of models which are service mapping models, which map the services, the VPN services, and the TE models. So let's go update one by one. Next slide, we will focus on VN model. Next slide. So an update to what is VN model. VN model is basically our Yang model for VN operations. It is the customer view of the virtual network. It is an abstraction over the TE topology and the TE tunnel model. It has a tight coupling with those models. It uses the connectivity matrix to describe how the VN interact. That is how the various VN members and the access points come together to form the VN. So the update in the latest model, the recent changes. Next slide. Let me go through them. So the main change was there was a request to clean up our names. I think this was common in bunch of T models. So as the same operation was done for IETF-TE and other models, we also took it up for the VN model, and we have resolved the naming issue thanks to Tom Patch and other people who have pointed out this issue. The another major update is we have added an empty container for underlay. As I was mentioning earlier, currently we have quite a tight coupling with TE topology model. So we have added this empty container underlay in a hope that any future update can be made very easily. A future augmentation can be done for this model to add things which cannot be covered by the TE topology model. For example, if you want to add details about SR policy, etc., that can be an augmentation of this model, and the place to augment that detail would be this empty container called underlay. So this is another update that we have done, and discussing one way to handle the discussion that we had when last this was presented, that how do we handle this issue. So right now, to keep the scope of the this draft limited, we thought that this could be a good approach, that we handle what is already published. Let's finish this and allow a way for this to be augmented in a future in a very clear way. So have an empty container for now, which can be augmented by a future model. We updated a description for VN compute status. We were reusing this from the T types, but it was not a one-to-one map. There was little bit description needs to be added, that how a T compute is little different from VN compute. So we have added that, though we are still reusing it, but we have added a description saying how we expect this to be used in the VN model. There was an update, there was a request to add COS as an additional constraint. We have added that. And then there was a major update with respect to the JSON example. Since the T topology model had quite a bit of change during the last few cycle, and we were still using the JSON example, which was written based on an older version of the T topology model. So based on that change, there was a pretty big update on the JSON example that is there in the document. So these covers all the recent changes that were made in the last couple of updates. Next slide. We wanted to ask the working group, are these changes okay? Do people have any other open issues? And we believe that if once these are handled, maybe we can consider this document in pipeline for working group last call. The Yang doctor review was done some time back on version 10. We can see if we need to repeat that again. Anyway, it will be done as a part of the last call process anyways. So this is my status. Thank you.
We have Lou in the queue.
I looked at the COS change and there's no context for it. So it's not immediately clear how you expect it to be used. So I think there needs to be a little more language around it. That's it.
So it's
Got it.
called it's called COS, but I thought I saw you use the DST class type. Is that what is being done here? It's a fee. You're just picking the DST class type 0 to 7, a value
Yes.
between 0 to 7. Is that what is being done?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm using the T types class itself, not defining anything new.
Right. So I think some description of how you expect this to be used is needed.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I will take, in fact, help from Kenichi itself, since it's coming a requirement from an operator. So the best is like, he himself can describe how he expects this to be used.
Yeah,
and
you
add
just
the
drop it in the
text.
description and we'll be good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the use of empty container for something to make it future proof, that's interesting. We do need people to review and see if that is the right approach.
Sure.
Uh,
Okay, so I think let's move on to the next models. So next we have telemetry Yang model. Next slide, please. In this model, we basically have the performance monitoring parameters. We also have something what we call as a scaling intent mechanism, where we tell at what time the capacity for our VN or tunnels can be increased and by how much. So basically, this model allows any customer to subscribe to various monitoring performance parameters for a particular tunnel or a VN, and also to define the scaling intent. So the update in this model, next slide. Basically, we handled comments from Adrian and Greg. Thank you for those. The major update was we removed the term KPI. I think it was, I agreed that it was not so useful. Let's call it telemetry model and keep it simple. We updated the figures to depict the model relationship. There was still some confusion that are we redefining things or are we reusing between the two models? So we have updated that description so that the readers is well aware of our intent with respect to the relationship between the models. We added an example for how the scaling would be done with help of XML example. And as usual, Adrian gave a lot of useful suggestions and nits, and I hope all those have been handled. We have comments from Greg regarding not to use the word proactive when we are talking about reoptimization. We had a back and forth discussion on the list, but I think it's better to avoid the term so we have removed the word proactive, and I think we have anyway described how the model lists tend to be used without using the term proactive. There was also a comment whether how it links with other work, such as one which is happening in ops area related to VPN service performance measurement. So we have added that how we assume that these two can work together, that you can have a VPN overlay PM as well as you can have traffic engineering telemetry data, and how both of them can be reused, used together and correlated when looking for fault, etc. We have also updated the security consideration, which was kind of lacking. So that's all the update for this model. There was one comment from Adrian, which I think which is in the next step. Next slide. That is, since we are talking about scaling intent and there is some overlap with the work that's happening in ops area, so there should be notification sent to them. So our query was that should we send it as authors, or is it better if it goes from chairs?
Yeah, we can definitely send it. There is, I mean, we haven't done a Young Doctors review for this document yet, right?
Yes.
So I think we can initiate that review, and as part of that also take care of reviews from other working groups.
I think the main point with ops area is I think this intent word is also like today in the ops area again this discussion was happening, and earlier also we had been this discussion whether the terminology maps. So I think just a quick idea of what we are doing. It's not just the modeling part but the terminology. that might be a good input to get from the ops area as well.
So keep in mind I want to call it the MIB doctor, sorry, Yang doctor review includes the ADs in the ops area. So they can chime in on whether we'll need a broader review.
Okay, that makes sense.
Tarek?
Dhruv, does this telemetry model cover the service telemetry as well as the transport underlay, or is it just the transport?
It's just the transport, just the TE and VN. And as I was mentioning, that it's in fact the VPN service Yang model where we expect the service telemetry to be there.
As well as like network slicing, for example.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it's network slicing is not covered in this.
okay, thanks.
Okay, so the final draft for me, the T service mapping model. Now, this model basically maps the services and the network, so various L3SM, L2SM, and even L1CSM, and also the network models like L3NM and L2NM. How do they map with the T infrastructure? So mapping to T topo, T tunnel, VN, etc. So all of this is handled in this model. Idea of this model is so that we could have a seamless service operations and understand how the service is being run on our underlay T network and what is the relationship between the two. This allows us to do monitoring and diagnostic much better, and it also supports various different types of map types. That is, what is the relationship between the service and TE. There could be multiple tight coupling or it could be loose. So those different map types are supported in this model. So the recent changes in the next slide. The recent changes, they were inputs from Adrian, Oscar, Kenichi, and based on that, what we have done is we have added a clear section on what is the purpose of this service mapping. So, and where we intend this to be used. One thing that we did clarify that this will be useful for an outside entity only if the outside entity also understand, for instance, VN and tunnel. Otherwise, this model would be more for internal purposes for the network itself, mostly for diagnostic and monitoring purposes, and might not be exposed to the outside world. So both of these are valid approaches. Like if the T topology and T tunnels are exposed, then this mapping could be useful by an external system. Otherwise, it's only for internal purposes. There were a bunch of things which were marked as open issues. And thanks for Adrian for pushing us and giving us good solutions on how to handle it. So we have kind of marked that scheduling is not part of this draft, but how it could be handled, those text has been added. One more open issue was how do we map traffic onto this particular services and our T infrastructure. So we have said that this is out of scope. There is some discussion. We know that this is happening in other Yang model. One early attempt that we did also exists with respect to this document, which I've mentioned. This is T traffic Yang, which tries to say that how we can maybe use ACL and like even flow spec kind of information to do. This is again very early work, but anyway, from the scope of this document, we are saying it is out of scope. Somewhere else this needs to be handled. So if there is an interest in this area, and please reach out to me as well. Next steps in the next slide. IETF network slice is out of scope, so we wanted to check whether that's a good approach. Do we need to add it as one of the other possible service types? Like if we are already handling L3, SML, and others, should we also map IETF network slice to T resources? Is this the right way to do it, or should something else is needed? So this is an open question to the working group. If people have thoughts on it, please tell us now or on the list. And one more request was that if you can add more examples of how this model could be used. in various different scenarios, especially covering all the section that we added about purpose of this document. So if we can add different scenarios where this model could be used. So we are planning to add a little bit more examples in this document. So those are the two next steps. And if people have any other open issues or thought on the IETF network slice part, please let us know.
So on the network slice part, I think we can proceed without it, and then we can always, if necessary, augment the model, and that way we don't have to hold up this document, which is hopefully getting pretty mature at this point. And if we tried to bring in slicing, that I think that would cause a large delay. And there's, as far as I can tell, there's no reason why it can't just be done as a standalone document and augment if we do need to augment. I think that's our perspective from the chair side. If anyone wants to give an alternate view, now would be a good time. Dhruv, do you think that works for the authors?
Yeah, let me just discuss with my author set as well and see what they feel. We are dependent on a couple of models still, like L1 CSM is one of them. There is SR policy. So though our TE part is going well, and those models are all like IETF-TE, IETF-TE Topo are all progressing. But on the other side, we have progress on L3NM, L2NM is also progressing. So I think L1 CSM and SR policy, those are the two models which we are dependent on. So we might have a little bit more time while this document would be ready to publish in RFC.
But those changes are not likely to change the content of this document, correct?
Yeah, that's true.
So if we sat in misref, it wouldn't be a big deal. We could just wait until those go through the process.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think if we could wrap this up and start going through the publication process, it would be better to do that than to try to hold it indefinitely or hold it much longer. I also had a comment on the prior slide. So you've added two very small sections on things that are out of scope. I found those to be really not clear what you're saying. And the nice thing is, though, is they're out of scope. And, many documents just are silent on things that are out of scope. So would you be opposed just to dropping those two sections? Or do you think paragraphs, I'm sorry, not sections, paragraphs, which just came in the last version. Or do you think we really have to state that it's explicitly out of scope?
I think the main reason why was these were the questions that were asked to the authors, and that's why we were maintaining them as an open issues. And people had this idea that, oh, without these things handled, is this mapping useful? So mainly because of that, we wanted to give it a little bit more importance. I think the text came from Adrian, if I'm not wrong, at least related to scheduling. So I can discuss with Adrian and post it to the working group and see what the working group thinks, whether we need to keep it or remove it.
Well, here's Adrian in queue.
Yeah. So my question was really just to the authors to say, have you deliberately left this out? And it's fine, in my opinion, that they've deliberately left it out, and their answer closed that for me. You might wonder what will happen when the next person reviews the document, and whether having this paragraph or just even reduce it to a sentence would help the reviewer and the next reviewer not also ask the question. But it's pretty unimportant, I think.
Yeah, and I'm worried about declaring things out of scope when someone comes along and wants to augment the document, that someone will use that statement about it being out of scope as saying that you can't augment the document. And I don't think that's what's intended here. And I just find that, unless it really seems that something should be in the scope of the document, it's better just to be silent on it.
Lou, in this case, in fact, we say that in future augmentation, you should do that. So I think
right.
let's...
So what's the point? So what's the point? And actually, the next paragraph is really the one I think is problematic. But I think in practice, it's better just to be quiet on things that are out of scope. If you'd like, I think talking it to your authors about the other paragraph and whether or not you're comfortable just being quiet there. Adding one sentence, currently out of scope, and then you say, although they could use their own scheduling mechanism. I don't think this is adding. I think it's opening a door that's not really clear. I really don't think the out of scope statements are adding anything. But I'm also happy to take that as a contributor position. As chair, definitely think it's bad practice to put out of scope statements unless you really need to. But as for these two particular ones, I'm happy to take it to the list and pursue it as contributor.
Sure.
Okay.
That's all from my side. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Dhruv. Adrian. Okay.
We're just waiting for, there we go, a set of slides. So you're going to fly, are you, rather than me? All right. So flip back a slide, please. I just want to start.
Do you prefer to drive?
I don't mind. I don't care. I just want to start by thanking everyone that's been involved, because although it's my name on the front page, it's not really my work so much. So this is all the people who were in the design team who wrote the foundation documents, the people that came along to the interim meeting and discussed it, and the many people who've contributed on the mailing list to move the work forward. So next slide. What we have in the fairly recently published 05 is an attempt to resolve the open issues that were discussed at the interim and had text proposals on the table. And so I'll run through these. The first one was connectivity matrices. And what we've done here is clarify the definition of the 4 basic connectivity matrices and added a new matrix for any-to-any connectivity. And the intention here is to enable every type of use case that people have been suggesting, chiefly operators. The general case is based on a sort of tunnel connectivity, but we also wanted to support the VPN type service, and that's what brings in any-to-any, which is not a tunnel connectivity. It's effectively a routable full mesh. So a little bit of discussion on that on the next slide, on how we can handle every type of service. Does any-to-any make multi-point to multi-point and multi-point to point unnecessary? And Kieran's new question on SLOs in P2MP. Before we get to that, the related issue was the question of SLOs and SLEs per sender/receiver, and that's closely tied. So let's go to the next slide. So here are the types of connectivity matrix that we've got defined. And I think that point-to-point is pretty straightforward. It's a pair of CEs with the traffic going from one to the other. It behaves like a private wire or a tunnel. And the SLOs and SLEs are applied at the sender, and so they're implicitly the same SLOs and SLEs at the receiver. It would be very odd if they weren't. The bidirectional version of that is really just a pairing, and there's no implication of co-rooted or not co-rooted, although I guess you could define an SLE to force that. There are 2 sets of SLOs, each applying to one of the CEs as its sender. So point to multipoint, it just extends that really. It's a single sender and multiple receivers, and it behaves like a point to multipoint tunnel or a multi-access VLAN segment. There is one set of SLOs and SLEs that apply at the sender, and therefore implicitly at all receivers, because all the traffic is going from the one sender to all the receivers. So far, so good. Then we get the multi-point to point, which is something that we've sort of seen in an LDP sense and then got added to RSVP-TE for MPLS. And what you have here is that all traffic that is injected at any sending CE is received by the single receiver. So you could model this as a set of point-to-point connections with a common receiver. Each sending CE has its own set of SLOs and SLEs, so it's not a given that each sender on this matrix has the same traffic requirements. And the implicit SLOs and SLEs for the receiving CE really are a combination of these sending SLOs and SLEs. Otherwise, you wouldn't get all the traffic delivered. So multipoint to multipoint is a bit ugly. I see Tarek in the queue, but I'll finish the slide and then we'll come back. Multipoint to multipoint is a little bit ugly in a tunnel sort of sense. There are NCEs that can send traffic, and that anything they send is delivered to all of the other CEs. Each sending CE has its own set of SLOs and SLEs, and the combination of those gives the implicit SLOs and SLEs for all of the receivers. And then we hit the any to any, and this is different. This is not tunnel-like. Here you have a set of CEs, and they may send to any of the other CEs, any one or any set, so they can support point-to-point and multicast. And it's not, unlike the multipoint to multipoint, it isn't the case that a sender's traffic is delivered to all receivers. So there's some implicit level of routing going on in this connectivity matrix that's not in the other ones. The matrix must determine to which CEs to deliver each packet. So something has to be looked up to work that out. And then the SLO SLEs apply to individual senders paired with their individual receivers. So you can actually say this, I'm going to send this sort of traffic from here to here. And then that means there's no linkage between sender and receiver, and a sender may be disappointed if a receiver is oversubscribed. So I'm not surprised this has caused a few hands to go up, and I think we should try to clear them before we move on. So Tarek.
Thanks, Adrian, on jotting down the types of matrices, connectivity matrices. I want to start with the basic matrix point-to-point. And my question is, we talk about a connectivity matrix and we talk about connections. In your view, a matrix can have multiple connections? And just to highlight that we're going to raise this topic up in the NBI, network slice NBI data model. We did discuss it among the authors, but I want to get your initial thoughts on this.
So when you say we talk about connections, I thought I had mopped all of that up out of the framework. I don't see it helpful to talk about connections and a connectivity matrix.
I do see it on your slide right now. This is like set of P2P connections, but
like. So
yeah.
that's providing some kind of context to help understand what we're talking about.
So I'll give you more context on my question. So if I have two network slice endpoints, basic network slice with two endpoints, and I want connectivity between them, will I be ending up creating one connectivity matrix with two point-to-point connections, or will I have two connectivity matrices where one in one of them the sender is one endpoint, other and the other it's the other endpoint? Can this be clarified?
Yeah, so let's put sort of names to that. If you want to send traffic A to B and you want to send traffic A to C, you have two matrices, two point-to-point matrices. You're right. My text in the multi-point-to-point was sloppy. It should say this is like a set of P2P connectivity matrices.
Yeah, I find it awkward that matrix is usually made of multiple entries, and your definition has only one entry, but maybe others.
No. Everything's got more than one entry because you're counting the CEs.
But point to point, there's only one entry. The way you
well, I hope not. I hope there's a receiver as well as a sender.
No.
So you list. Think of a list of CEs for your whole network, all of the edges, and then each matrix you're going through and saying, I'm connecting this set of CEs. And in the point-to-point case, yes, it's almost trivial, but you still have both ends of them. So you have two CEs in your matrix.
Okay, I mean, this is the last thing I'm going to mention on this. In the TE topology model, we used connectivity matrix in an attempt to create such a mesh. And there's a list of entries in one matrix. Maybe we should talk about it offline, or
yeah, we should certainly try to get some either alignment between the use of terminology or an intentional divergence. I'm fine with that. This usage has been around for a couple of revisions, so we might assume that it's been thought about a bit, but yeah, let's get together and try to resolve that. Torles.
So I think the two fundamentals here are point-to-point and point-to-multipoint, and everything else is just a random subset of potentially interesting groupings, right? And maybe it would be very helpful to just say that there needs to be the concept of groupings, and these can still be listed there, but obviously there'll be other interesting ones. I think we have redundant hub and spoke, and I don't want to go through the list, but otherwise it looks like a long flat list, that may become confusing.
So I hear what you're saying, but I think you need to step back, and this is from a service perspective. So, for example, something like hub and spoke is about realization inside the network, and the service may want to talk about that, or the service user may want to talk about that, but they have no real control over what the network is doing.
No. I think, for example, a set of point-to-point where one point is always the same, right? A set of bidirectional point-to-points with one point being the hub and the others all the spoke is exactly a grouping like many of the others here, like any-to-any, or multi-point to multi-point or so, right? So hub and spoke is in the same bucket as a type of connectivity matrix. You have n+1 nodes, n of them can only send to the +1, and the +1 can send to any of the n. Same thing, right? So just as an example of how you can extend this list.
So if the hub is a customer site, that is very different from if the hub is inside the network.
Yeah, and I think here we are only talking about the customer side, and so of course my example then also only talks about customer sites.
Right. So we had, and I think we've removed a paragraph that actually told you how to make a hub and spoke using a customer site by building that out of multi-point to point and a set of point to points. But
Exactly.
we can revisit that.
No, but I just wanted to make one example. There are more examples. In the same way as you removed the hub and spoke, you can equally remove the bidirectional point-to-point if you do have the concept that the customer can request a connectivity matrix of a set of fundamentals, like a set of P2P and P2MP with a common policy. Then all these others, bidirectional, multi-point to point, multi-point to multi-point, A to A, are just creations out of, here is a set of fundamentals like a set of P2P, and I want to have this set and a common policy. And then we don't need to argue whether a bidirectional P2P has, is so much more important to be listed, whereas hub and spoke is not listed.
Okay, gotcha. Let's take Srihari and then move on with other slides. Oh, well, Lou's in the queue as well. Srihari.
Sure. So I might have a question very similar to what Torles was talking about. Let me just ask the question and then you can defer to same answer. What I'm struggling with is, let's say take a multi-point to point example, where the receiving CE's SLO is implicitly derived from the multiple senders. What I am thinking, maybe you can correct me, if I am receiving this, if I'm the receiver CE, then I get to define, and because I'm paying for the service, so I get to define what SLOs do I need, and therefore implicitly all the senders SLO should be derived, is what I'm thinking. Care to comment on it?
I think we want to facilitate that, but I'm not sure we want to constrain to it. Does that make sense?
But as of now, you're trying to implicitly derive the receiving CE's SLO from the senders. Is that the only option, or can we do also the opposite?
Yeah, we could. I guess we could. So far, we've not, until we get to any, we've not specified the SLOs for the receiver. But I'd be interested to hear if people have got sort of like operator use cases where they need to specify the receiver's SLO on a pipe model as different from the sender. Srihari went quiet, so I guess Lou.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure what happened there.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I'll wait for more comments. Yeah, I'll just my comment there. Yeah.
All right. So I'd like to go back to how many sort of external services are exposed. We have been through whether or not bidirectional is a special case of point-to-point. Bidirectional point-to-point is a special case of unidirectional. And we have gone through that discussion so many times, and every time at the end we come back and say, yeah, bidirectional is important to call out separately. So I'd like to propose that we keep that in. There's been lots of times where that is a important provisioned service or important service to deliver to a user. Some of the others, I think it's how you construct your matrix. And if you see a matrix as a set of items, then you certainly could build some of the lower three out of the top 3, I think, although I'm not 100% sure on what A2A means, other than maybe a slacker SLO or SLE. Thanks. That's it.
I guess we keep going on this slide. If the chairs are happy that that I gobble up some of the spare time at the end of the second session.
Yeah, so with chair hat on, we've already privately said we expect this slide to be the last slide of this session, and then we'll continue the rest of the slides at the start of the next session.
Okay, yep.
We expected the discussion again.
Yeah, that works, whatever you want, or we can take it at the end, you choose. Okay, Lewis, then.
Just commenting on the cases that you mentioned before about the need of having an explicit view of the receiver SLO. I think that because we are not explicitly describing the way in which we are distributing the content, if it's unicast or multicast, could be the cases that if we go for a multicast or for unicast, this has an impact on the receiver side. So this could be a case, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think we need to look carefully at the A to A matrix compared to, say, the P to MP matrix. But this comes back to the question that we had before: is does A to A make actually MP to P and MP to MP redundant? And then actually, I think you get everything you want through the A to A. So I'm a little confused by the hands that are still up, but I think Wim is next.
Yeah, so I think thanks for doing the great work, because this is not an easy thing. My main question that I have is the following, which is also have a follow-up question. So the connectivity matrix, in my view, is mainly to help define the characteristics of the SLO and SLEs. Is my understanding correct, Adrian?
Yes, sort of. I mean, consider yourself there requesting a slice service. You need to say, in some sense, what the traffic demand is going to be. I'm going to be sending traffic from here to here, and this is how I want it to behave. So it's a kind of an anchor for the SLOs, but it's a little bit more than that.
Yeah. Because see, the reason why I bring it up is the following. I'm a bit of the opinion that or agree with some of the comments that we should try to model it as much as possible as a point-to-point thing, because there is another potential characteristic that we say here. We say that for point-to-point, there is a single CE and a single sender and a single receiving, but I also believe when I glanced over the draft, there is a mention of multi-homing in the sense that even a receiver can consist of multiple CEs, even for a point-to-point, and you will have to define the proportion of bandwidth that goes to one versus the other. Not? To make it even more complex.
I find myself having to thank you for making it more complex.
Sorry about that, but because
multi-homing. Need to think about multi-homing in this context.
Because I think we defined it in there was a sentence of all active and single active and stuff like that. So even for point-to-point, you're not restrictive in that sense to a single CE device. So as a result, I believe, is it not better that we try to model each of these scenarios or traffic or connectivity matrices as a collection of point-to-point with certain characteristics, such that and use that to define the SLA and SLO? That's what goes on in my mind, is to try to help a little bit this thing. But yeah, I wanted to bring up this multi-homed as well, because that brings yet another dimension, which makes it even more complex. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Need to think about that, definitely.
We have 1 more minute before we take a break. Maybe you can take 1 more comment, and then we can take a break.
I can do that. That would be Louis.
Hear me?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah, my comment is really taking it a step back. I know what a CE is, but I'm trying to bring the CE, which is, in your draft customer endpoints, in the context of this. I mean, is a UE a CE? Is the app behind the UE a CE? I'm trying to figure out, where do you define the CE, or is it just on the network edge? Because that's yeah.
Nice question, because we have a point coming up on the next slide, which you'll get after your break, that is talking about how we talk about endpoints, service endpoints, in the context of slicing. And I'm not comfortable with CE, although we sort of understand what it means. It's not very good when the CE is in fact a service delivery point in the middle of the network, or the end of the network slice is actually in a PE. So it's ugly. And yeah.
We're on the same page. Okay, I'll wait for the next session.
Yeah, I think we can stop here. Tarek, Reza, if you guys can hold on to your questions, we can resume after half hour. Does that work for you, Adrian?
A whole half hour? What am I going to do?
I'm the CE.
Well, thank you all. We're going to break now, and we'll see you in half an hour.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
I believe we will have a new link for the next session, so everyone should exit and rejoin. Sorry about that. That's just the way Meet Echo is set up.